and then we can talk again. So this is Thursday, January 28th, 9 o'clock in the morning, and we're doing our waste site cleanup office hours where you have a chance to ask us questions and we tell you what's we've been up to for what is now a couple weeks. It's been 2 weeks since we had this. Took last week off because we had a senior staff meeting to look into the future and figure out what we're going to be doing for the next year or so. And recap last year and figure out kind of how we managed to do what we did, which given everything that was going on. So we haven't seen each other in 2 weeks. Not much has happened in 2 weeks, huh? Been a quiet couple weeks. No big news, no big events. Not bad.
Nice change. It's a nice change.
It's a nice change. There was that inauguration last week, I guess, that happened. And actually, sometime in this past week has been spent on the DEP side trying to do what always happens when there's a change in administration at the federal level, and kind of similarly at the state level, where EPA is preparing a bunch of transition documents, or has been preparing transition documents, looking forward to the new EPA administrator that's going in place. There will be eventually a new Region 1 administrator. So there are various levels of detail kind of as you go further up the chain. DEP has also been working with the national and regional associations to kind of prepare introductory letters and documents about who we are, what we do, what issues are important to the various organizations, particularly from the state level. So working with ETSWAMO, the American State Association of State and Territorial Solid Waste Management Officials, nationally, locally, NMOR and NMOR being the waste folks. There are also NUEPIC being the water people, and NESCOM being the air people, and so forth. And kind of just trying to highlight what some of the major issues that will be coming up, what's important to us, and should there be a change in direction, kind of where we would want it to go. Also, kind of highlighting where we would like things to continue on as they are. I mean, it's a wide range of things. Obviously, if you've been following along in the papers, in various blogs and that sort of thing, there has been a change of direction that has come up. Yesterday, for instance, there were a number of executive orders which really focused on environmental concerns. And I have to be honest, as the assistant commissioner for waste site cleanup, the waste site cleanup world is not at the center of all of this. Obviously, a lot is going on with climate change that is and should be on the forefront of everybody's minds, and it's interesting and exciting to see the potential for action along these lines. There are kind of not hidden away, but the less obvious things that certainly do affect kind of waste site cleanup world, as all other worlds, is the various executive orders and strategies and policies that are coming out that are reinforcing the administration's use of science and science advisory boards, and explicitly acknowledging the role that that science has to play in among other things, environmental regulation. So that certainly affects waste site cleanup type of decisions. Things like what we saw fairly recently, I think it was in November or December, where a decision was made not to regulate perchlorate in drinking water. For instance, a question that had been kind of on EPA's desk since about 2006 or so. And I think in decisions like that, which are really not only policy-based and program-based, but also goes back to the basic science of how concerned should we be about exposures to an emerging contaminant, what had been an emerging contaminant, I guess it's emerged now, perchlorate, and whether or not to take action. And you see those decisions repeated kind of across the board on other kind of more hot chemicals, certainly. And it's, I think, comforting to me to think that the decision, whatever direction people go on things like regulating PFAS and evaluating the science behind it and having that science feed into the policy decision, however it ends up, it's a little bit comforting to know that science will be a big part of that. So those are kind of the things that interest me as I look at some of these memoranda and executive orders that are coming out, reinforcing the role that science has to play in this. Have you any interesting or unique executive orders and things that you've seen that have sparked your interest? No, just rolling along, huh?
Well, speaking of regulatory things, did you and Liz and John have a chance to evangelize with your colleagues in Connecticut yet? I understand from Mr. Stevens that you were going to chat with them.
We did. John wasn't able to make it at the time, but Liz and I did sit down with the folks in the state of Connecticut and talked about, why there's really a lot of kind of background discussion of, and Liz, jump in, correct me or add to it, kind of how our program is, how it works, kind of why decisions to look at it one way or another were made back in the early 90s, how it has, I think they were particularly interested in kind of how it has evolved over time and the changes that we have made based upon kind of the experience along the way. So we did spend some time and have offered to continue working with them, as they need us. It's certainly easy to do these talks over Zoom. If we can find time when we're all free. So they did point out that Matt, that you had volunteered our time, so we just reinforced that yes, we accept Matt's suggestions.
I did not mean to be overly liberal with the Commonwealth's resources, since I'm not in any position to commit the Commonwealth. But
we're accepting the commitment that Matt made.
It was a widespread request, actually. If I presume they recorded some of their working group meetings of however many of us are on the working group, but there was particularly from EPOC, the analog of LSPA for LEPs in Connecticut, a request that we try to learn from the experiences of others and not try to build on what has already gone before and learn from that. So
and we've done the same thing. We try to steal as much as we can from other state agencies and from the federal government, and learn from them. So it's really just paying back what we have benefited from, and we all move ahead.
Okay, and so we've been organized into our sub work groups to work on things, and I'm on the discovery, I guess, the initiation of the process. And one of the questions that's come up has been, hey, what about this having knowledge thing? So how does Massachusetts handle having knowledge, and how should Connecticut handle it? And again, I think the other part is just from the business and industry and maybe a lot of the people in the consulting attorney regulatory community is, it would be good if there was some relative consistency. We understand there's differences in each state and how their laws and everything are organized, but if there could be some sort of relative consistency between states, especially in a little area like southern New England, it would probably improve, the lessen venue shopping, like, I'm going to put my business in Massachusetts because the laws are easier on me or something, or Connecticut, or vice versa, or Rhode Island.
I wasn't clear exactly where they are in terms of, have they passed the basic statute that they're going to build the program around, or is that still in the works?
They have passed a statute saying that they need to sunset the current program and develop this new program. And I understand from Commissioner Dykes that it is her interest that this process be wrapped up in less than 2 years. So we shall see. But
is there potentially another state law that would be the equivalent of 21E
no.
to come? No.
The issue in Connecticut now is that you have, the numbers vary, but there are at least 17 separate statutes and regulatory programs at the moment. So
yeah,
the idea is to try to consolidate that. So, and learn from Massachusetts. So thank you. I just want to say thank you very much, and I appreciate the update.
Yeah, we certainly don't want this to become the Connecticut.
Yeah. Right. No,
No, I do want to, what I do think is interesting in terms of where they are is we talked a little bit about how over time we had made revisions that where we dropped some necessary approvals. Our programs evolved over time as we became more comfortable with, letting some things go presumptive approval. But so they're at the beginning of this and they haven't necessarily developed that level of comfort. So
well, they have some. I mean, they're revising their regulations to incorporate more LEP initiative or whatever. So, I had advised, the people who were asking for this, that I understood from Paul that not only would you tell them what you actually have done, but there might be things that you wish you could do but haven't, or might wish you had done differently or something. So
yeah,
again, hoping to build.
That's always fraught with pitfalls, because there are certainly things that would make our lives kind of as regulators easier, but would not necessarily be the way we would want to go as a program overall in the big picture kind of thing. So it is tough kind of going through, what would I do differently if I wanted to make my job as assistant commissioner or somebody else's job as an auditor easier? Yeah, but that's not necessarily how we measure the success of the program making my job easier. It's how well thank you. And I didn't mean to monopolize your office hours, but I think it is important, and shows that Massachusetts extends beyond Massachusetts. Thank you. It is, and it would be interesting if there were certainly more consistency across the states that would make a lot of people's lives easier. Speaking from my experience of kind of working through NUMOA, where we do get together frequently and talk about just those kinds of issues, that it's given the differences in the programs and laws and how it all works, it's not as easy as one would like. But to the extent that we can help Connecticut, that would be great. And to the extent that you guys can help Connecticut, I would encourage you to.
Well, again, thank you.
Yeah.
Paul,
Yep.
Barry Fogel here. I just wanted to speak to the question that Matt asked about knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I think we've talked about this before, but my brief 2 cents are these. Over the years, I've had instances on real estate transactions where sellers of property have tried to write purchase and sale agreements to say that the buyer has an access right to come in and do some testing and due diligence, but to not give the results of that testing to the seller, and just if they don't like the property, they just don't move forward with the purchase. And whenever I've been on either side of that, I have always argued that knowledge, obviously the way it's defined, but for purposeful avoidance of gaining information. And I've said, if the seller knows that the buyer is doing some testing and is going to get some results, I believe they're obligated to receive those results. Not to put the LSP in the middle of making a decision of what's reportable or not, but that the seller has to receive that information. They can't turf it through a lawyer and try to protect it that way. I've had good success in sort of holding the line on that, but I don't know if the department's ever had to confront that issue.
So I switched to gallery view to see if Luke Rogers was here, our program attorney, because obviously this is a legal issue that my attorneys would want me to say, I'm not an attorney and I'm not expressing any legal opinion here. I think I would leave it as, knowledge is certainly an interesting concept, and that it's always easier to talk about it in the extreme and trying to figure out when somebody actually has sufficient knowledge that there's something there that should be investigated, and what's the term, willful blindness, what eventually becomes willful blindness and at what point. Certainly having one real estate deal fall apart for any number of reasons, having a half dozen of them fall apart at the same point after the same actions take place, is a more extreme view that a rational person should begin to wonder what's going wrong with these. So I'm going to leave it there, and because obviously what the MCP specifies about knowledge and what the statute says about knowledge is there. It's what's written, and then the interpretation of that is going to be more on a case-by-case basis. So I'm dodging that question or that statement entirely. But it's not as black and white defined as some people certainly would like. It certainly would. Again, this may be one of those things. Would it make my job easier to have knowledge very, very explicitly defined and very, very black and white? Certainly. Is that the best thing for the program? I don't know. I would, at least in part, to the lawyers. And kind of how real estate transactions work, and kind of what is the optimum way for all of this to happen. Because obviously it's in our interest for real estate transactions to go ahead, because a lot of the remediation that we see is taking underutilized sites and redeveloping them into something else, and a lot of remediation gets done along the way. So that is our bread and butter, like it's your bread and butter. So let's move away from that.
Oh.
One of the things that, hold on, Wendy. One of the other things that had come up before most of you got on the phone, and following up from an earlier conversation we have, which is, when are you all getting vaccinated? And we have been asked several times by various organizations, including the LSP Association, and our staff, and the unions that represent our staff, to whether it's the LSPs or like our emergency response workers or asbestos inspectors or our staff that go out and go into people's basements for indoor air sampling for vapor intrusion. We, like you, have a lot of potential exposure. Our emergency response staff don't have a lot of choice on what site, what bills they get to go out on, and which ones they can just let go by. And they often find themselves out there dealing with people who are not wearing masks, including first responders who are not wearing masks. And they don't have a lot of choice. They can't not work with them. And I expect that you guys are in the same position. So I'm reiterating what I believe I've said before, and which we talked about again last week in our senior staff retreat, and earlier this week as well. Every time I have a chance, the topic comes up, that the way these decisions are made about, who goes in what group, and what phase of the vaccination process, those decisions are made well above my pay grade, well above our commissioner's pay grade. But what we're trying to do is make sure that the information about what we do and what you do and what the wastewater treatment plant operators do and the public water supply operators do, gets all that information gets into the hands of the people who are making the decisions, and we keep lobbying and pushing for those of us who are put in a position where we're potentially exposed to be further up in the chain for vaccination, recognizing the potential risk that we're doing as essential employees, essential workers, and part of the overall infrastructure keeping the Commonwealth going. That's my update for that.
And I would just add that 1, yay, I got my second shot on Monday. 2, just in time to find out that having my second shot of Moderna is developing the 3rd booster shot vaccine, so now you need another shot. But just to say again, to put out a plea or a call, the available volunteers are getting really stretched, and with the Governor Baker's rollout and trying to get more large vaccination sites, while they need tons of people and they're grabbing all the nursing students and stuff and everybody else who can give a shot in any way, shape, or form, there are tons of other people needed to ask the questions of all the people coming in and screen them with temperature and register them and they're at the site, and then observe them afterwards for 15 minutes to make sure and help guide them out again. So there's a huge need for volunteers. So, and they have so far continued to be generous. And at the end of the day, you usually have some doses left, and they vaccinate volunteers. So just a push there, in case anybody has available time.
I would also point out that you might have seen, I don't know if it actually went out, they were talking about doing a Twitter post about it. I'm not sure it actually happened, but there may have been a tweet going out showing one of our really good low temperature freezers, the -80 freezer that we had at the Wall Experiment Station, being transported to Fenway Park. And so it's part of that vaccination center at the moment. So, we gave a lot of our N95 masks and material we've been stockpiling to respond to bird flu early on in the pandemic. We had this freezer that was available that we could loan out to the process. We're hoping to get some vaccines in exchange for that. No, that didn't work. That was a joke. We didn't try. But that went out, I guess, earlier this week.
You're going to get vaccines, did you say, Paul?
No, I was joking. No, it had been suggested that we hold the freezer hostage for a package of vaccines. That was a joke. The freezer was donated with no strings attached. It did have a power cord, however.
Who the hell's in charge of getting vaccines to you guys? Bureau wayside cleanup, emergency response people. You said that's above your pay raise. Who is that individual?
Well, we are, for better or for worse, I believe that state employees are playing by the same rules as everybody else. So, the criteria that looks out at kind of where you fall, if we have staff who are older and who have health concerns, that's a category that is being moved up, and so some of our staff will be vaccinated because they are registering online like we all are. People like me, sometime in June, probably, I'm going to go to their registration sites and get my vaccine. We're no different. So what the trick is to try to make sure that we are explicitly as explicitly as possible, listed in the categories of people that fall into the different phases. So right now, I know if you look at the phase 2 and talking about critical infrastructure, there's a line, in the listing, who now qualifies. There are lines in there for wastewater treatment plant operators. It would be nice, it would be helpful to have specific recognition of emergency response workers, hazardous waste cleanup professionals, that sort of thing. Like they were similar to what was described in the executive orders that had come out last April, where there were lines in there specifically for workers who are dealing with the assessment and cleanup of contamination. I'm paraphrasing.
Thank you, Paul. Let me sum things up. We're basically all on our own to get vaccinations. There's no group effort I see with MassD and what MassDEP pushing to say that, yeah, we're entering basements and police officers are leaving our sites after.
No, Bill, I think you're MassDEP is going through the channels up the chain to make that argument.
Good. You're involved, LSPs.
And you are included in our discussion, not only the DEP staff, but the people that we work with in the private sector. DEP ER staff, LSPs who are going out doing work, DEP asbestos inspectors, DEP asbestos inspectors and asbestos workers out there. DEP inspectors of wastewater treatment plants, wastewater treatment plant operators. So we are trying to make the case up the chain to whatever board, committee, all of this flows to that makes those determinations. And I can only say I know for a fact that it is being transmitted up, through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, because I've talked with and I've heard directly from the people who are making those arguments and presenting that information. Where it goes from there, to whatever board, and it's over in the health area, the people that are doing all of this COVID work. I don't know. I personally don't know how those decisions are made. I'm sure they're taking in a lot of information and they're trying to weigh all of this. And the best I can do is make sure that it's being pushed up the chain as far as I can see.
And do you know where that is right now up the chain?
I know that it's that case has been made several times up through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
And let me close on this because I know I've already irritated you. Is the bottom line is by the time you get up the chain, the phase 1's going to be over. And I'm done.
Yeah, I'm trying to just describe kind of how we fit into the process. And I can certainly, I hear your frustration. I anticipate a lot of other people are equally frustrated. I know our staff are anxious. I know the unions that represent those staff are also similarly working to raise these issues. I'm going to try to be fair to the people whose job it is to make those decisions and recognize that I expect that everybody and their brother is making a similar case that for their specific reasons, they are particularly at risk and need to be further up in the vaccine chain. And I have no way of evaluating, comparing, my ER staff's exposures and risk to other people's that I don't even know about.
You're pissing me off, Paul. DEP, and you'll find out that we've been on site and DEP has not been. They've been not in basements. We're in the basement. So screw that. Come on, man, get it together. All right, I'm done now. Just let me stop.
Okay,
So pissed off right now that we're not working as a group. It's all individuals. It's freaking clear.
so moving on, Wendy.
Thank you.
Wendy, you still there? Save me.
Here, 1 second. Okay, I'm unmuted now. Okay. Thank you for the update, because I was going to ask about that. And I will echo Matt's thank you, but in a different area. The Department of Labor standards sent around their revised final in capital regulations and for asbestos workers and handling. And we were really happy to see that the section 2813, which dealt with asbestos in soil, had been completely eliminated. And that was the section where the LSPA, and I'm guessing others, maybe DP too, you guys, had said, wait a second, this is going to be confusing and problematic with the MCP. So it was terrific to see that that section was gone. So thank you for what I'm assuming is some internal conversations that happened there, and curious to know if those internal conversations may have been a bit of a sign that maybe the two bureaus were progressing in some conversations about improving that process or streamlining that process. You know, within DP.
Yeah,
The same question, basically.
yeah, I mean, yes, there are. I mean, there are always ongoing conversations about, certainly within DEP, about asbestos and the management of asbestos, et cetera. You know, at the moment, it's not the highest priority. Again, because there are other competing priorities, but it's certainly not. It has not gone away. So.
So there weren't any new initiatives that came out of those discussions as you were discussing basically how to handle the DLS regs?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. But thumbs up, thank you. That was nerve-wracking, and we were very happy to see that the next version of the regs and the final version evidently will not have that section in there.
And speaking of nerve-wracking, then, so now you're able to move on to the DOR regulations that are out for public comment.
Yes, exactly.
I was going to ask you about that, Paul. Is DEP going to weigh in on those at all? Like the provision that says compliance with the MCP doesn't necessarily mean it's something that DOR would give you credit for?
I think I very artfully dodged that question a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to
see if you can dodge it again.
Do it again. Well, in that, DEP and DOR certainly have ongoing discussions.
Okay.
About it. What we are have to be kind of cognizant of as DEP is that in the end, these are DOR's regulations, and they have program and policy objectives in kind of putting out these regulations that ultimately is going to be in their realm to make. What we want to make sure is that DOR understands what our regulations say, how they're interpreted, how they're used, and that there are no misconceptions and misinterpretations of the MCP in their regulations. I think to oversimplify the regulations, they're working with their statutes, and we're working with our statutes. Our goal is to clean up sites, and their goal is to reimburse for the cleanup of sites, or not reimburse, sorry, using 21J language. Their goal is to provide tax credits for cleaning up sites. And they're working with different constraints than we are. So at some point, they may be, they're going to be making decisions about the regs based on their policy decisions policy goals, and as long as it does not rely upon a false or incorrect interpretation of the MCP, then it's going to be in their bailiwick. I think certainly looking at the regulations and providing comments on the specific wording and the implications for different policy choices in it is what the public comment process is there for, and to make sure that they fully understand kind of what the implications are. And of course, if there are any misinterpretations of the MCP that we are missing, that might still be there, that may be subtle, pointing them out as well. Yeah, Dave.
Thank you, Paul. And actually, I wanted to just chime in and kind of link something that you said earlier to what Larry was just mentioning, is that one of the highlights of the MCP and the LSP program is the tremendous success in redevelopment of commercial properties in Massachusetts. And I think if we look at the last 20 years, that successful redevelopment in Mass has been significantly greater than both Connecticut and Rhode Island. And part of that is the interaction of waste site cleanup and the LSP program. And a huge aspect of that is the independence of LSPs having to put our license on the line to say we followed an MCP opinion or an LSP opinion to achieve closure. A tremendous number of sites have been transacted and redeveloped and are successfully contributing to the tax rolls in the Commonwealth. A greater proportion of properties, I would suggest, than in Connecticut or Rhode Island because of that program. And so when DOR looks at pulling in and making smaller the potential tax revenue or tax credits for either the brownfields tax credit or 21J under the reimbursement program, and they're saying, oh, we're going to put a guidance in place that says, an LSP made a decision to get to a permanent solution and to attempt to achieve background, which is absolutely stated in our MCP. When DOR is limiting those decisions or the reimbursement of certain decisions counter to an LSP opinion, I feel like that's actually not in the big picture tax growth of the Commonwealth's perspective. If DEP can remind DOR that the continued cleanup and redevelopment and use of commercial properties is absolutely the best way to maximize tax revenue for the Commonwealth, then small scale refining and limiting of reimbursements and tax credits should be kind of overwhelmed. So anyway, that's my thought. I feel like the MCP program really works and we should take advantage of that and show that it actually is great for, and I'm not running for office, but it's good for job growth and it's great for tax revenue.
Yeah, and David, I think the way you phrase that kind of highlights kind of the area where I'm uncomfortable being any more specific, in that you described it as DEP may express how reimbursing for the cleanup is a way of maximizing tax growth and development in the state, which kind of is way off into the economic and tax policy field that I'm certainly not comfortable. It's not my lane, and that's the sort of thing that is really in DOR's bailiwick. What DEP and DEP staff can contribute to that is making sure that they are making those decisions with a clear understanding of what the MCP says and what it requires.
Thank you. And my logic there was really saying for wayside cleanup to argue, you got to let the LSPs give the LSP opinion. And then if they've done that and achieved permanent solution and maximized the cleanup of the site, then there should be less restrictions on what's tax creditable or reimbursable. It's like, listen to the LSP, we had to do the work to get the site to closure. And if there's some bad opinion that needs to get audited and resolved, great, go fix those. We don't want those. But if someone has done things, played by the rules, followed the MCP, and gotten a site to permanent solution and hopefully achieve background, then we don't want to be then told after the fact, oh, sorry, that's not a tax credit activity. Like the LSP has to be able to give our client guidance in the development planning to say, if you do these things, we will get you to closure, and then you can plan on some reimbursement through tax credit or through 21J. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
Everybody should find this a fascinating discussion, and thus you should be interested in going and reading what actually the DOR regulations say and think through the implications, because I think that's one of the helpful pieces of going out for public comment, not just the specific, oh, you missed a comma there, you used the wrong version of there, but taking what is written and trying to kind of look into the future and say, okay, if it's written this way, here are the implications, this is what will happen. Or if you choose a different approach, you might have a different outcome. And that's helpful to the people that will be reviewing the comments and revising the regs as necessary. So, good luck. It's an interesting process to go through. So, any other big items you guys want to talk about?
Paul, I had a question that you may have answered this a month back. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, Barry.
The regulations for notification 1040.0311.6, a release to the environment indicated by measurement of OHM in a private drinking water supply well at concentrations equal or greater than an RCGW1. This testing you're doing of private wells and public wells, but on the private wells, what was it that you said at one of the prior meetings about the notification requirement if this testing comes up with a detection above the GW1 standard for PFAS?
So the private well testing for PFAS, just to bring everybody up to the same point, DEP regional offices are working with towns now to prepare the way, and we're seeking volunteers at the DEP private well PFAS sampling website, which hopefully should be easier to use than the vaccination websites. So there should be private well sampling coming up fairly soon, actually happening. So the question of what happens when there's actually something above 20 parts per trillion, the RCGW1, and as part of the signing up in agreement and essentially access agreement type of thing, the agreement to sample, where we do want to make clear to the homeowner, and I've provided links before to the web pages and the Q&A that's out there, kind of what their potential obligations are and potential liabilities are under 21E. And one of the clear-cut ones is a requirement to notify the department of any of these exceedances. So getting at Barry's point. So as part of this agreement, the homeowner who's volunteering for this authorizes the department to make the notification for them. So we won't be put in the awkward position of us getting the data from the lab, reviewing it, making sure the QA/QC is okay, sending it to the homeowner, and then starting the clock ticking for when the homeowner calls us back to notify. That doesn't seem like a good use of bureaucracy. So the homeowner will be authorizing us to make the notification for them, so that when we become aware of, when we have knowledge, if you will, from the lab, then we will note that to ourselves, and the notification obligation will have been fulfilled. And then it will be up to DEP to determine, based upon the facts of the situation, kind of what will then happen after that. Whether and that may depend upon what the concentrations are, where the homeowner is, the likelihood of it being a release that's regulated by 21E or release to the environment, rather than say, hypothetically atmospheric deposition or something like that. So there are a variety of different outcomes from that point on, but we'll be working with the homeowner to kind of bring them through it.
Thanks for that. Will an RTN be assigned?
Again, I'd say there are some cases where RTN will be assigned very quickly, and then there will be cases where we may put assigning an RTN into abeyance, pending more information about what the source is and where we're going to go from there. keeping in mind that kind of the point of all of this is basically a big research project to give us a better understanding of what concentrations of PFAS are out there across the state, and what potential sources are. And like other contaminants out there, there may be situations which, upon more information, further reflection, and more study, we decide, conclude, or it becomes clear that it's not a kind of 21E regulated type of release. So all of this is trying to figure out what's going on, and the decision on how to proceed on these cases may be delayed in the 21E world until we have a better understanding of it all.
Thank you.
But if you do have private wells and you want to express, I think the way it's being described, you can sign up on the website to express interest in being sampled. And then as we get to your town, there's a process that DEP will go through with the boards of health and local officials to kind of figure out, among the people that have expressed interest, kind of where to sample in order to get a good distribution across the town, given the number of samples that will be allocated to that. In some ways, it's very much like the vaccination process. And I say that warily. Any other questions, observations? How are you making it?
Yeah, I have one related to that. Have you heard from communities, boards of health, about their reluctance to participate? I'm wondering if boards of health really understand the implications and how explicit DEP is being about that.
We're trying to be very explicit. And if Gerard is still here, he may want to chime in. Is Gerard here?
Perfect timing for Gerard to take off.
So we do want to be very explicit about it, particularly in times of COVID, where the boards of health are already stretched. And so the initial step in all of this is to contact the local board of health and say, okay, we have this private well sampling program that you may have heard about. We would like to come through the miracle of Zoom and talk to you about what the process is, what the program is, and what to expect. And then it will be up to the Board of Health and the local officials to decide if they want us to proceed with that. And if not, and it's perfectly understandable if they say, no, we're overwhelmed, we're not ready for that. There have been those kinds of meetings with a couple towns already. I know Gerard had participated in at least one of them. And from what I've heard, I haven't been involved directly in those. The boards that they have already talked to, first, they're towns that have already had some experience with PFAS. So they're starting from a different level of awareness and understanding, and kind of understand the how important it might be. So I believe that so far the response has been positive, and that we will be moving ahead in at least some of these towns to selecting the homes for sampling.
So it's the Board of Health's responsibility to manage the process with the individual well owners, property owners?
No, actually, it's not. I mean, obviously, well, it's always more complicated than you want it to be.
Right.
But we have UMass Amherst and UMass Lowell under contract to manage the process as a whole, to do a lot of the legwork, to do outreach to the homeowners, to provide educational material, to make sure that samples get there, that they get sent back to the lab, to provide the educational material for how to take the samples, because the homeowner will be taking the samples. all of that. So we're trying to alleviate pressure from the local boards of health in that way.
Mhm.
But we do want to be very, very explicit when in talking with them that no matter how hard we try, that and we do want the Board of Health's input into selecting the locations, you know,
Right.
the example or not. So that is a specific ask of them. It requires some time and some thought. But we also want them to be aware, you know, which I think they generally are and they appreciate it, but it is a specific item for conversation that no matter how good the folks at UMass are and how good they are at educating and training and doing all of that logistics, when push comes to shove, particularly if there are elevated hits,
Right.
come back, the local Board of Health will be asked, okay, what does this mean? What's going to happen? You know, it's inevitable that local officials will be pulled into it. And we
Right,
want to make sure
right.
that they're aware of that going into it.
Right. So in addition to education about how the samples will be collected and all of that, are homeowners presented with some basic resources about the potential liability? I mean, it's a big concern. It's just been discussed a lot in LSPA, within the LSPA, about would it be better if the homeowners, if it was like a blind study or double blind or something like that, like if the homeowners weren't aware, or getting back to this knowledge piece, but so that the data could still be collected. Board of Health might have information, DP would definitely have information to collect a database, but homeowners wouldn't necessarily be put in a situation where they have great uncertainty about what the outcome might be for them personally, financially.
Yes, and that was discussed back and forth, and and we are where we are. That it's
Okay.
not as anonymous. But having said that, yes, we had the same concerns that the homeowners have to make informed decisions on this. So I'm trying to find. So I'm going to share the screen again, and then you can watch along with me as I try to find this. Share screen. Come on, where are you? There we go. So this is our PFAS homepage, and let's see, I'm going to go to PFAS and research because I think it's there. New private well drinking water supply testing program. So if you start here, the general introduction letter and private well PFAS sampling FAQ, that brings you to a page. And I'm just going to blow through this, but you can follow this process. So this is the introductory level to boards of health leaders and other interested parties describing what the program is, blah, 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 blah. Then if you're interested, well, here's the public water supply one. There's information from ATSDR about the health effects. The general PFAS page we just came from, signed by Pisa. We get into the private well, frequently asked questions about the private well sampling program. This is mostly the nuts and bolts piece of it. There's a fact sheet for consumers, you know, what happens. FAQ for the private drinking well supplies, what people need to know. So I believe that might be this one. Private well sampling program, FAQ. I think this goes out, so I think this link actually comes back to this page. But so it describes all of that. Here are the towns that are being the focus of our work. What are the resources that are available? How do you sign up? Who collects? Links to the training.
Right.
Where are we going? What will happen if it's confirmed at an elevated level? Link to the MCP. Good luck with that. But there's private well PFAS sampling program 21E Q&A. We'll click on that. And you bring up this one, which then gets into where do they come from? Sources, how do laws apply? What are the laws? Am I responsible under chapter 20?
That's the one.
Can you slow down there?
That's the one. That's the one.
So it talks about the reportable concentration. And your electronic, Barry, this is what we were talking about before. Your
Yeah.
electronic signature on the private well sampling program agreement indicates you understand and agree that PFAS to be provided to the wayside cleanup program and will satisfy the reportable concentration notification required under the MCP. So,
Kind of buried in there, isn't it?
well, you know, all of this, you know, it's all a priority, you know. So it goes on to describe what happens if it's found. It talks about degrading property status.
That
Obligation.
second bullet right there. In the absence of a known PRP, DPS property owner will in most cases be responsible for ensuring that the water consumed on their property is safe. Not to mention any responsibility that they have toward the MCP. Then now they have this financial, it's the liability under the MCP, and then also the financial liability and responsibility to get their water tested. Presumably, if they say yes to the program, then they know they may have to do something. But the MCP responsibility is the piece that is tricky. And I feel like, you know, most people aren't going to understand what this could lead to. That's the concern.
Yep, and that's I would say at your leisure, read through that.
Yeah, no, I haven't gone to that. I'd seen the other part, but not that piece. I mean, frankly, I mean, the LSPA is really concerned about the implications here. And also personally, I was thinking about offering a well out in Western Mass, but I don't know.
I know, and for what's there, I don't know what I would do if I had a private well.
So I'm going to chime in.
Okay, Dave, yes.
That's exactly the chair I'm sitting in, right? My private well's right over there. I live in a very rural area, so there's not a known source like proximal, like within 3 miles of my house. I would love to have this information. And honestly, part of the knowledge, like I understand why not giving the data to a homeowner is bad, because if it's greater than 20 parts per trillion, you say, hey, we want to get you drinking cleaner water. Like we want homeowners, and if it's greater than 90, automatic, let's get something out there. So we want people to have access to safe water. But then I look at it and think, if I'm looking to sell my house in the next couple of years, and I'm the only house on the street that has an MCP reportable PFAS, even though I could tell my neighbors, you guys probably all are.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's
very similar situation, right? Not knowing like overburden well versus bedrock, but that reputation aside, here I am, even if the DEP doesn't take my sample, me as an LSP with my performance standards, if I have data that says it's above an MCP reportable condition, I have to notify, like regardless of what you guys do. And so I would love to have information and help support the town and the state with this data. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like what's my future regulatory obligation? And then the last thing I'll add about that list of towns, which is great, it was nice to share that, those are some really low revenue communities, right? Like the towns that don't have municipal water supplies tend to be either small towns in Western Mass or bigger towns in Southeastern Mass or in the eastern half of the state, but with really low population densities. And so those boards of health are already stretched pretty thin. I mean, they want to help. I used to be on my board of health and people will do what they need to do, but these are communities that have lower tax rate or lower tax income and very few people relatively. So I think a huge thing that this state will get is as the rollout of the public water supply testing has to happen, like so the October, January, April with the smaller communities getting rolled out. So those are going to be all the schools and restaurants and community public water supply wells in the communities. That data will be a huge data set to say, oh, you know what? We don't have the houses in this neighborhood, but we have the Dunkin' Donuts and the school and the town hall. Let's put that on a map. So anyway, I'm very reluctant and I would love to have the information.
Me too.
Yeah. Interesting. There are a handful of towns in Massachusetts that do not have the transient non-community wells, the Dunkin' Donuts, those kind of small public water supplies that look like private water supplies. So yeah, we went through that same thought process that in a lot of these communities, when you get down to these small public water supply systems, that's going to give you a lot of the same information we would get through the private well sampling program, kind of at the same scale. But there are actually a number of towns that don't even have those.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That had not occurred to me. So yeah, and those are the kind of discussions that we have been having, will have with the local communities. And to take kind of that point just one step further, where it's not only the private, certainly the private wells and the effect that this will have on the Board of Health. They're already overwhelmed, and if we start seeing stuff, they're going to be even more overwhelmed. But also some of the certainly potential sources that are in towns, like the local fire departments we've seen, have been the source of localized, but still significant within that local area, PFAS contamination. So going into it, kind of making sure that the local communities recognize kind of not just the kind of time drain that will be that they may get, but also the maybe obligations on them as a town that they might not otherwise be aware of. So that's another thing that we want to be clear and when we start the discussion.
I'm currently the LSP for one of those communities in Central Mass, and having those conversations with your team and saying, the town had to set aside money at town meeting to take these next steps, and they have to realize that's going to carry on for a long time.
Right. And
even though the fire department got that PFAS from the state or the DOD, generously donated to them as a wonderful thing.
sometimes they're generously donated. Sometimes they purchase them themselves.
Anyway, if the town is the PRP, there's a funding challenge with timing and voting for money.
Right. So the discussions not only include kind of the point Wendy brought up about making sure the homeowners are aware of what that they may become PRPs, but also there's a potential liability for the town as well. So the kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. We are going into this and having these discussions, trying to be as frank as we can about what might happen, and then if again we're not forcing this upon a community if they want to pass for now, then we're not going to go in without them.
So is it reasonable to assume that as you identify private wells that become RTNs, that you'll share kind of data on, how many of them have you, what kind of action DP has taken or required on those, so that we have a sense of your decision-making about how you're going to handle these? Because you had said that, it's really going to be kind of case by case, and there could be a range of decisions, or not, I don't mean formal decisions, but how you go forward well by well. Will you share that information so we have a sense of 90% of them it's okay?
Yeah, so I think there will be a couple of data streams. One will be certainly through there will be, if there isn't already, there will be a PFAS data portal where there will be summaries of kind of the results both from the public water supply testing program and the private water supply testing program. And I know they're working with our GIS folks to come up with a good way of, for that data stream, there's no need to get down into the address and of the individual wells.
Right.
So that will be anonymized for presentation to the public. But there'll be summary statistics about what we're seeing, and also a graphic representation of any given town where we might be seeing in yellows, reds, and greens, and blue colors to indicate areas that might be more hotspots where we've had elevated levels.
Yeah, great.
So there'll be that. The other kind of data stream or information stream that will be if we are as we decide that, individual locations, certainly if they require state funding, us to go out if there's a financial inability and we're going to be spending state money, then, then it has to kind of be in the 21E program, the MCP. So they will have RTNs and there will be, the kind of first overall availability of the data, through the RTN, through the site file view and all of that, but also we'll be summarizing on the PFAS, data board, whatever that, whatever portal, the trendy word, the portal. There'll be summaries there.
Okay.
So many sites, will brought into the system, that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks.
So 10:07, any last questions, concerns? Yep. Okay, well, that was fun. It was good seeing you all. After 2 weeks, we're back to, I assume, a weekly schedule for the time being until somebody schedules some other unavoidable conflict for me. So see you again next week.
Thank you, Paul.
Have a good week. Good talking to you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.